I went to the fireman's ball. Can you hear me? No.
We can hear you. We can hear you, yeah. Can you hear? Oh, he's frozen. He's frozen.
I went to the fireman's ball last week. And let's see.
Roger, you're coming in and out.
Connection's unstable.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Cool. I'm gonna mute. I'm finishing something else, but I'm joining you guys.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, want to try again? Roger?
Yes. Yes.
Hi.
Yeah. I was saying I went to the fireman's ball a few days ago. And they said, "Oh, we know you. You're the guy that has the great snow scene behind you when you join the meetings." So I'm known by my background.
Where was that? Was that at Snowbird, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a snowbird.
And was it just for 113 or was it for
Oh no, it was for the whole UFA. I mean, it was very well attended. I mean, it was in the big ballroom at the Cliff.
Cool.
And it was for the whole hierarchy, and had
I'll start when I start.
what is it called? The
I was gonna forget. Thank you.
the bagpipes and drum ensemble, or about 10 of those. And so they marched in and did a little concert, and it was I thought it was kind of fun.
Roger, have you heard from Craig Harmer? You know,
I have not. I
Well,
don't know
it's 2:01, so I'm gonna start the meeting without him, I guess. and
if
we'll-
I don't know if he's on this continent. If Craig is. Oh, look at
Yes.
that. Yes, he is
Mhm.
on this continent. Well, he's somewhere.
Okay, I'm gonna start the meeting, okay? Okay, I'm gonna call, hi Craig. We've done audio checks with everybody else, do we?
Hi, Jen.
Hi. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, looks like he's in Palo Alto.
No,
pretty loud.
I am in Chicago.
Hotel room.
I will now lament about my age because this is the second unplanned funeral in like 5 weeks.
Oh,
Crap.
no.
Oh boy.
sorry to hear that, Craig. I'm
Yeah.
gonna call the budget committee meeting of May 7th, 2025 to order. The first item on the agenda is discussion and possible action to adopt the minutes from April 24th, not the 15th. Budget committee meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move we
Were
adopt the-
people able to review those? I know I just sent them out a couple days ago, so if we need to postpone that, we can, but.
No, I reviewed them and the minutes look fine, although they prompted a lot more thoughts by me. So, but I don't know when I want to discuss that, but a bunch of thoughts.
But in terms of the content, they're fine.
Yeah.
Adopt the minutes.
Okay, motion by Chris, second.
Second.
Anyone? Second by Dan, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right.
Motion passes. The minutes of April 24th, 2025 are approved. And next, we are going to go through, we're gonna go through kind of a truncated version of the presentation, highlighting some changes and just kind of some current thinking. And then we did, Chris and I did want to actually show the committee the actual detailed budget and go through that, since that is going to be presented to the council next week, and they will be required to adopt a tentative budget. So we didn't want to skip over that important step. But first, we'll kind of go big picture thinking. Greetings, Mike. And those of you online, just to let you know who is here, I am here, Chris is here, Chris Holly, Mike Morey just joined us, and then we have Molly Austin and Brooke Boone in the room.
So I don't think we have anything new to well, we've got a couple minor changes to share on this slide. No changes in assumptions about property tax or sales tax increases. We have made some adjustments, some increases to expenses. And because of that, Jen will talk through more when we get to the budget, an increase in the proposal to use unreserved fund balance. So goes from 225,000 to 296,000. I will note, I glanced over Jen's shoulder at these slides, about an hour ago, and we decided they were good to go. But number 4 is not quite accurate. We actually gonna propose increasing the cost of the shuttle program by 8% next year, which is what we are hearing from the vendor. There's lots more to talk about with the shuttle program, and there's a pretty good chance it changes, and that means that the cost of it can change. But so anyways, that's not quite correct.
Yes, thank you for.
I want to say
Chris.
something about this, under the property tax increase. 100K is
The increase.
the increase, yeah. But what is meaningful to the property tax public is how much it is for them. Now, normally in property tax presentations such as this, it says this is so many dollars per 100K valuation. So I would actually suggest that for our community, you put in how many dollars it is per $1 million of evaluation.
Yeah, Roger, you made that comment last meeting, and I appreciate that. I actually took the slide out on that for this meeting because there's no information outside of me giving that little tidbit. I don't get the information to be able to actually project those numbers more thoughtfully until the end of May. So I wasn't planning on updating that until later. So truth in taxation is a drawn out process, as you probably are aware of. And so the council would actually be adopting that in August. So we have some more work to do on that and some more time.
Okay.
But I will remember that $1 million mark for you and put that in future presentations.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Jen, along that
Yeah.
line that would be useful is if we just did a sample change for like the average house.
That's
There
what
you
you
go.
have to, you're required to do that. You actually get that data from the county and you're required to
Okay,
present that.
all right.
So yeah, but I,
It would be old. It would be sort of subject to change, but
yes.
project on.
Yeah, no, just that exhibit is, I mean, it's two things. It's per $1 million and what's the average increase gonna actually look like? And on that average increase, I think it is important that we keep reminding people that not very much of the property tax bill flows through to the town of Alta. So I would just do that on that same exhibit.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't want to prolong this slide deck or this our discussion of this first introductory slide, but like the property tax increase section says this is truth in taxation, and this is that biannual sort of housekeeping property tax increase, but $100,000 is more than that. But I was thinking about that number and some conversations I had at the conventions I was at a few weeks ago. One conversation with Brett Hauser at Brian Head, who many of us know, about how when the need arises to increase full-time staff, his position is that we need to raise property taxes. We are, bringing on another marshal's deputy. That has, been one of the towns and one of the town council's highest priorities. And this will enable us to cover those costs, amongst other things. I mean, it's so, this is not just a matter of costs generally going up. It's that we have deliberately decided to grow the town, and this is the way we're going to cover the costs to do so. It's one of the ways.
This slide is the basically the highest level of revenue for the town. So Craig, if you recall, this is kind of where we take the detailed budget and we coded it into these buckets.
Yeah, I remember the categorization. I
Yep,
do have a question
yes.
though, Jen. What do you expect revenue to come in at? And what I mean by that is early on with Mike, I thought we might be like 5% below last year. And then later on, I got the sense that it might be coming in on last year. Do you have a better sense of where you think it's actually going to come in?
For FY25, we're going to be really close to what we budgeted. Like, I'm surprised at how close I think we're going to be.
Yeah, that is
No,
surprising.
I mean, those are still my numbers, generally speaking. Let me actually look. I mean, we're really close. We could potentially come in a little ahead on sales tax, but I can't imagine below because we're 2 months behind.
Okay, so
Yeah,
better than
I think we're gonna be really
I
close.
expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And then you're basically projecting same number next year, correct?
So on this slide, the top property tax, we have an increase of $100,000.
Yeah.
And then the sales tax, yes, that is exactly what we budgeted for the current year, FY25.
Okay.
Same for FY26.
All right.
So our revenue from property tax is going up 20%, right? We're going from 505 to that plus 100K.
405 to 505.
Okay, this reflects that.
This is
Okay, all right.
FY26. Yeah.
All right, yeah.
I don't have the comparison in here.
And, thought through that way, it seems like a huge increase because that's a 25% increase. That said, I actually think the way that John Byrne characterized it is this is just keeping up with the rise in the house values in Alta. And if you don't do this, you don't keep up with it. It's not quite the same, in my mind at least, as a tax increase. And I do think that I think it was both you, Roger, and maybe John Byrne as well last time, really cautioned about increasing the property tax too much. And I think that's a really great point. Part of my thoughts from the last meeting is, okay, how do we afford, a new building and some of the other stuff if we don't increase the property tax? And that's going to be a tad complicated. So it's not for this meeting, but I'll, reiterate some of the comments I made last time about we really need to get some serious budget committee and council time to actually prepare for the increases that I think we're going to need to afford some of the projects we've got on our out years.
Thanks, Craig. Are there any more questions about this slide? Okay. Chris, do you want?
Yeah, there are fewer material changes to this slide than the first one. And the big one is that Jen has gone ahead in our draft budget at she started to program in expenses related to Our Lady of the Snows. So we did include a significant amount of wages to do snow removal and janitorial, light building maintenance kind of stuff, and all that is subject to is to be determined based on the lease arrangement we work out with ACE, and we have been working on that with ACE. So but for now, the conservative thing to do in our budget is to assume we're spending the money, and we can dig into that later.
Well put. This is a similar slide to the 2 slides ago that we just looked at. High level picture looking at the total expenses for the town across all 4 funds.
Good slide.
You say good slide?
Yeah, I said good slide.
Yeah, I agree, but I do have one question. It's a great slide, actually. On the capital fund projects,
Yes,
I'm assuming that's all of the capital projects across the 3 funds effectively.
it is.
Yeah.
Yep, it is. And it includes the purchase of OLS.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And a quick question then on that, on slide 12, I think, on the budget, when we're looking at the capital expense, the 1.1 includes, it's the building and the Tom Moore continuation, or completion, and there was something else on there. All those were combined for the 1.1, correct? Those 3 projects?
Can you hold that question till we get to that page?
No, it must be answered
No.
immediately.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you're
man.
talking about, you point me to the exact page that you're referring to
It's like 10, I think, correct, or Dan, right?
in the
Page
presentation, or
No, we can come back to it. It's no problem. We can come back to it when we
no?
get
That's
through this.
well, I did make one mistake on the budget for FY25, so I'm wondering if you're kind of
Yeah, the
catching in on that.
110 instead of 1148 or something.
No, that's oh yeah, facility planning. Yeah, those.
Pretty close.
Yeah, I need to rework that a little bit. So you are talking about page 12, you said, Dan, the capital projects for FY26, the 1.1 million. And we can answer that here if I go forward to this slide.
Yeah,
Yep.
line
Yeah,
item
so my
750.
numbers are off. I didn't catch that.
Oh, okay, all right, right.
So yeah, so this is actually the cap, so if we look across here at the 1.148 for FY26. That is what my total should be in the budget, and it's not, so I need to fix that.
Okay.
Thank you for drawing my attention to that. Yes, and I also realized that while we're on it, my FY25 number was missing the $150,000 of due diligence and earnest money. So I need to update that for the council presentation as well. Oops.
We probably should have moved this up,
What?
move this slide up maybe
Yeah.
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 to below revenue. Now we go back into some wage info.
Yeah, well, that's expense.
Yes, anyway.
We just have this slide on here, the wage study plan, but you've seen this before, so I'm just gonna skip over it real quick. But as Chris was alluding to earlier, this is the wages by department and the comparison, and the major change here is just that I added that community center OLS line item for FY26. the 17,500.
Yeah, I would, on the stuff at the bottom, which basically is an attempt to separate the costs between increase in the number of staff and the amount paid, per staff person.
Mhm.
I would add the 17.5 is the same as the fifth officer wages. In other words, both of those are due
Are
to
new.
increases in the size
Yeah.
of the staff, not, and otherwise that 80,000 on top of 1.4 is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be like 5.5 or 6%, which is way bigger than the 2.5% COLA. That's why I'm suggesting you put it down there.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great comment. I'll make that addition to the, or, add it to the next version.
Okay, capital projects, so there's not a whole lot new on this slide either, but I got a couple things I wanna highlight, are that kind of like, just at the last moment, literally yesterday. We were looking at updates to the formal capital projects plans, the plans for capital expenses from the capital fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. We do have draft water and sewer master plans. So we've got updated capital improvement recommendations from the engineers doing the planning work. And cost estimates for those. And so we were plugging some of those new numbers into our water and sewer capital plans. And deciding what year to put them in. Generally, they're in the same years as projects have been every other year. I realized that we need to explicitly fund and prepare staff to do engineering if we're going to do a water project and a sewer project in fiscal 27, which is what our capital plans have said we're going to do. So we bumped it. Basically, we always have some engineering expenses in the budgets, but we bumped those amounts up based on our experience in funding engineering and design for the Crossdoor project. So not a huge, it does have an impact on those budgets, not a huge impact. But it does imply that we are going to, we're more likely to implement those projects and spend major capital funds on projects next fiscal year. And then we can talk more about Harley as well.
Go back one. Mike, if he's there, I think he is. How many security cameras are there and where are they?
There are 3 cameras. One is on our evidence room cage downstairs in this building. One is atop the Gold Miner's Daughter Lodge, the other's atop the Forest Service Garage.
Got it. Okay.
And this is a project to install some more. Hypothetically, or is it?
Ideally, yes, this is a project to install more.
Oh, I see. This is not for those 3. This is for an additional.
We may be faced with pulling away from our existing camera vendor due to failure to perform up to their agreement. And we may have to go a little bit back to the drawing board on.
Cause some of those 3 that you just listed, 2 of them are not really working correctly.
2 of them are not performing to the standards the vendor assured us they would perform to.
Right.
Okay. So is this basically getting the current 3 to work, or is this adding any?
Well, again, ideally, we'd like to enhance our capabilities, but we may need that funding to revitalizing our existing cameras.
Okay.
But your evidence room, that's not under threat, that's functioning adequately for you to maintain custody?
It's currently functioning well. However, if we abandon the vendor platform that we're using, we'll need to find another provider, and hardware for that.
The main difference is that that one's kind of more hardwired in to a system, whereas the other two we've been trying to figure out these remote situations with cellular networks, and that's just been difficult, right?
The cameras that we rely on for, mobility, to be able to pan around and get different views, are the cameras that are giving us the issues. The one in the basement is a static camera.
Sorry, that's it. Yeah, there are really no changes to this slide, but it was pretty new last meeting, and the most important component of this is that this is where we first revealed the range of costs projected by FFKR and their facility planning work for the town to replace buildings. So we are anticipating that Nate Henry from FFKR, we're planning to have him come to the council meeting next week for a half hour to present their findings on space planning, which will essentially culminate in a couple different ways to think about a new building on this site to incorporate functions and program areas from our Alpha Central and this building.
Chris, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well, just to speak it out loud for the record, the range of costs to essentially to replace, like for like square footage and functionality in Alpha Central, and this building is the low end is 6.2 million and the high end is 12.5 million to add space, more or less, and to more substantially reconfigure the facilities that would remain functional, which under the kind of proposal from FFKR is really just the town office. So that's the big news on this slide. It hasn't changed from last time.
And Chris,
To build on that a little bit, are we looking at doing a semi-retreat or mini retreat or deluxe retreat to amplify, I think, some of the exploration of, because there's a big change, right? Where OLS is in the equation, what does that mean? And I think some dialogue, both public and amongst the staff and council, if we're doing that this summer, I think is pretty clutch.
Yeah, yes, we need to do some strategic thinking about the recommendations from FFKR, which they'll present next week. The project won't be finalized at that point. They still have to do the Tom Moore toilet evaluation, which is also going to take place next week, which I'm really excited about. And so anyways, we'll get the final document. We'll consider whether we want to adopt it or just sort of consider it, important information. And then we'll have to think about how to make it, because we're not going to make the decision about what project to do. Like FFKR is not going to get us all the way through that. So we'll have to kind of let them put their pencils down, and then we'll have to think about how to make that decision. And I think it probably is something we have to get people together in a focused manner to do for something like a half day.
Yeah, because it's looming for sure, and there's no room in the town council meeting, or it's probably not the best venue because of the purpose of the town council meetings. But I think there's opportunity here for us, obviously, to course adjust. Doesn't mean we're on the wrong track at all, but I think it's going to come in. I think the picture will continue to come into sharper focus, both with information from what they provide us, but I think from an internal town discussion standpoint, that'll ripple across this committee as well as what the town does in a larger sense.
And
Yeah,
Dan, that's actually, when I said I had a bunch of comments prompted by the minutes, it was all along these lines. So if you can just bear with me for like 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to lay out what a tentative timeline. And they're really prompted by your comment last time that, you know, we need to get this stuff in front of the town, but realize the town has no idea of what's going on with their infrastructure and need to replace it. So we're going to have to do a fairly thorough briefing on that. So in terms of timing, I think that it would be best if we actually did that town briefing early in January. And the reason for that is the bulk of this budget impact and stuff like that is going to fall on the new council, not on the current council. But because it's taken a long time to get, and the current council, I think, is very good, and we've got them up to speed on a lot of the infrastructure issues, but the new council, you don't want to bushwhack them too much. So I actually thought if we were going to do the town meeting in the beginning of January, that would require us to have, or not require us, I would suggest that we would want to have a similar type of retreat, not a town meeting retreat, but an actual strategic retreat. But this time with the new council members and the old council members, and go through, you know, all of the long-term planning and financial projections. Now, working backwards from that, here's what I think it means. I think it means we got to get a handle on the bond situation ASAP. And last time when we discussed this, Chris said, well, you know, you need to hire a bond consultant and do that. So I think we should do that. I think we should do it pretty quickly and put it into this draft budget. I would then suggest that we would have a meeting with the budget committee, because there's a lot of homework we have to do before we can have a really productive meeting on this. Because people are going to ask questions about, you know, what are the rates in other locales and stuff like that. And I would suggest we would have that meeting maybe at the end of August or the beginning of September. And then that would be the meeting where hopefully we'd pull all the information we've got together, have preliminary discussions on this, and then identify what more research would have to be done to do that meeting in December with both the old and the new council. I'm not expecting a response on that today, but as I was going through it, I just realized the combination of the town handover and the budget implications hitting that new council mostly, and yet the knowledge base for most of that is in the old council. I thought it might be, you know, prudent to have that kind of handoff.
I
Nice
I
idea.
agree. I think in the spirit of that, but with an eye on not stalling out, because part of your logic would also dictate that when you get into the second half, or when you get into the second year of any 2-year period, you stop progress because you're planning for the next couple of members to swap out. Either 2 or 3 people could possibly swap out. I'm not a fan of stopping all considerations, but I think we can prep that, sorry for the term, battle space before we get to that or maneuver room, whatever. Sorry about the military speak. I'm in a military base. In order to continue to build a pretty good sight picture of what we think the future, you know, steps should be, without having to stall out and not take any action for fear of, you know, I don't want to commit anybody, like you said. I don't want to commit people by virtue of coming into office, but what I don't want to do is not continue to explore those things to make sure we understand as much information as possible. And we can do that without obligating or ambushing those folks, I think.
Yeah, I where my head's at is once you do we're going to need to do a bond issuance. I just don't see a way through this without doing a
But
bond.
that's like a year-long process, right? You think that
Right.
takes time?
What it is that we have to do an election. And I believe it has to be on election day. So,
Oh,
and you know, who knows, well, if we're gonna do a general obligation bond, revenue bonds, I think are easier, but they're not as capable, like, and so if we're doing a a general obligation bond, which is a property tax, instrument, then it gets approved, it gets, you know, approved by the council and then approved by the voters. And I don't know, I think you have to do that like in November on election day. I don't know if that's the case, for sure the case or not. But
can you check,
that's,
can you check into that? Because I think that's critical. I don't
Right.
feel like we'd be ready for a bond by this election personally, but I don't.
no, I don't think we'll have the
Right.
need.
Everybody
But-
agrees. Okay, so let's not bog down on what we know we can't do, which means, to your point, Craig, one, we do have some time to work with. But can you, Chris, it would be very helpful to validate or verify if this can only happen on an election day. And I believe it's correct, which means we have 2.5 years to wait.
Or we have to do an election on this issue. I don't know. This is exactly why I said, I think our first thing that we need to do is hire a bond consultant. And then my guess is that bond will be issued sometime in the 2-year period of the new council coming in. And once that bond is issued, you're pretty much locked in. So you're not delaying stuff, Dan.
Yeah,
But I just looked out and go, well, shit, if we're gonna do a bond issuance here, then the council's got to be brought in early and all the mechanics and blah, blah, blah.
well, it's a lot of moving parts, obviously, but you know, I'm just a huge fan of determining requirements. And once you've determined them, you build a plan and then you act. And sometimes I feel like we can stall out, and unsurprisingly, I don't like stalling out, but I go with the consensus. Like, I don't want to rush anything, because I think this is one of the biggest things the town's going to do in a long time, bigger than OLS.
Well,
Potential.
we're talking about facilities, but we also have like millions of dollars in infrastructure, in utility
Right.
infrastructure needs as well, so that's just like.
Yeah, it's one item.
It's,
And to wit, if you just go with that schedule I laid out, I do not think we want to walk into that meeting in December with a 6.2 to 12.5 range. And I think that
I
means,
agree.
so I think that means that we're going to have a subcommittee. You know, I don't care if it's a formal subcommittee or not, but a couple of council members and the staff to work together this summer to take that range down to something much more reasonable and concrete with
Narrow.
basically pretty much a specific proposal. And that's got to start soon, because that's a lot of work.
Man, that sounds like, I defer to Chris and Jen. That sounds like a lot of heavy lift between now. I don't think you can do that. I don't think, maybe we have to have some more discussion, but I would fear trying to put that onto your shoulders, you two. Would you agree? I mean, you've got these other projects, there's OLS coordination.
I mean, I think, I appreciate that, Dan, I think it's, you know. The capital plan says we're gonna build a building beginning in fiscal 28.
Yeah,
And I think that this is our timeline if we're gonna do that. I mean, we could certainly take a year. I think there's a risk in not starting the conversation with the current council in place, because this current council has been so.
Yep.
Well aligned and bold in discussing, you know, raising revenues to fund all this essential capital replacement that the town's never done in 55 years. So it's gonna have to happen at some point or another. It's gonna have to happen, and I think the way that Craig laid out the process sounds like expertly designed, Craig. I mean, I think that. There are 4 or 5 major strategic steps. And I think you laid them out. I mean, hiring a bond consultant, you know. I don't know when exactly the right time is to do that. I think that typically the bond actually pays for that, and they don't even get paid until the bond is issued. But whether that's true or not, in all cases, I'm sure there are other ways to get that input, so. The bond consultant is the person, and what you're required to have is somebody who actually goes out and gets the debt. And does the calculation and, you know, does the shopping and all that. So anyway.
Well, my interpretation of what you're saying, Chris, is by virtue of levying those tasks onto that person, which is such a critical first step, because I agree with what Craig's laid out 100%. Use the expertise, and we got to have it anyway, and we can put that onto them. I mean, I don't know where you find one of those guys. I'm looking around Tampa. I haven't seen any bond experts in my travels around town. So I don't know where those animals exist, but if we find one of those cats, we can, you know, to your point, we can start some progress on this thing. No obligation, no pressure, but we're getting this information that's absolutely essential. And if we can start shaping that, that would be cool. And
We get some
sounds like that's
delicious
okay on
Fuji
your end, right?
We get some delicious Fuji apples in the office every Christmas time from a bond agent.
Oh,
And I
okay.
get emails, phone calls from him monthly. So you know, if we need to make it happen, I'm sure we can find a way.
And you know, just sticking with the 6 to 12.5 million range, we can't afford 12.5 million. But this is exactly where we don't want to lose the knowledge out of this council. They are well aware of all the discussions around OLS. They'll make, I believe they're going to make really sound decisions around, well, how much community space do we need? You know, I think they're smart enough not to repeat the Boeing 747, you know, size facility, you know, stuff like that. You start with new people, you may have to take them through that whole education curve, and we'll just thrash around so long, we'll miss the damn opportunity. Even if it's 2.5 years, we'll miss the opportunity to do the bond issuance then. So,
And I think we're positioned well for the continuity, particularly because I feel Elise is here. And I think her continued tenure on the town, because she's not up for reelection.
right.
I think that facilitates some of this continuity and confidence you can place in how this goes. I'm not trying to put everything on her shoulders. It's just to your point, Craig. I think we can carry that message forward regardless if we lose 60% of our people.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, now we're gonna look at the capital plans. I think that we looked at a version of this with purchase price, due diligence and OLS repairs last time. We've got that new $9 million to replace a building in fiscal 28. That's the middle of the range. One other thing that we added is some design costs for a trailhead restaurant. So yeah. You know, with OLS now in the picture, and that is a potential site.
I will close it, but we'll be quiet again in a second. Sorry, we're just taking a.
Some heavy equipment transiting. So yeah, with OLS, you know, it throws a monkey wrench in our progress towards a trailhead restroom, and you know, $20,000 seems like a fine amount to do. A site plan for something up near Grizzly or something like that. I don't know how far it would get us towards, you know, feasibility or site planning at OLS, but anyways, it's in there, and we'll start to write a scope to hire some engineers to do a site plan.
So this next slide is the, I just couldn't fit it all on the first slide, but this is the projections, so cash balance of the fund itself. So this is just the math behind it, and I just want to, call out some of the assumptions that we've made in the future. Which are, I've just plugged in $150,000 for the capital fund transfer. So this is the general fund contributing to the capital projects fund. And the way, because this is cash, and we're looking at year-end beginning balances and year-end balances, you're always kind of a year behind. So the amount of money from FY24, the 522,000, that didn't actually transfer until we were in FY25. So that's why it shows up in FY25. Because I know Chris had a question about that, and I think others have questioned that as well. So I just want to kind of point that out, that that's always like a delay of a year. And then we just have, I have the, what else do I want to point out on this? That's probably good enough. I guess what the one question Chris and I had was, does the budget committee see value in spreading the expense of the 9 million across several years, assuming we're gonna be, if all things go well, we'll have it built in 2 to 3 years. Would we want to see it drawn out across that sort of timeline instead of just one lump sum in 1 year? That's kind of a preference of the committee. In a mass
Right,
question.
it's like,
You're gonna do that in 1 year. So you're gonna have to have 2, and guess what? My guess is there'll be a residual in the 3rd year as well. I think we should try to plan to get it done in 2 and spread the expense over 3.
and
Okay.
by the way, Jen, those numbers I checked with Nate, and they do not include design costs. They do include all other contingencies, overhead, all that. But those.
So the 9 million doesn't know.
Presumably, we'll need more money if it's a
Okay.
$9 million building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that something that we might have available for the next iteration of this before the council, or no? Like some sort of,
I don't
Rough?
think it's worth, I don't think it's worth it. That million is too high level. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if design is 5% or 2% or 10%, but.
The more you spend on the design, the more accurate your cost estimate is going to be.
I think we're good.
okay. This is the water fund. I was able to, it's a little small, but I did send this out to all of you. This includes the plan itself for capital projects, as well as the projections at the bottom. So there's a lot of new stuff on this slide. Most of it is in, it's all in red, the stuff that hasn't officially been approved by the council. We, on the top line there, we are programming out engineering work every other year for all the projects that are listed below. Do you want to point anything else out on this slide?
I'll just point out that, those engineering numbers are new. The amounts in our engineering line item in, past years' water fund budgets and sewer fund budgets have been pretty nominal, and we oftentimes don't spend much out of that. We found that we needed, we amended that line in the FY25 water fund budget in September to do the project, and we actually wound up amending it to half the price of the estimate of the proposal that we got, and we worked with the vendor to slice and dice that design project so that it came in at that $22,000 amount. It's reasonable to assume we're gonna need some money, every other year in the year prior to doing a project. So these actual capital projects, which are down at the bottom of the plan in 27, 29, and 31, those are the new cost estimates that tank estimate has not changed since we started seeing these numbers, but the lower Alta distribution line, that's the Hellgate loop. And then the asbestos concrete pipe replacement started uphill of Hellgate. Those numbers are actually smaller than what we've had in the capital projects plan since we plugged them in, like probably in the last year or so, or 2 years. So that's, that's good. And we also have from the capital plan, we have this new line item at the very bottom that's not programmed out. It's not allocated to a year. A high level cost to replace all the rest of the infrastructure. And that's just based on a, cost per linear foot number, though that's from the engineers. So that's all just really up for discussion at this point.
Yeah, there's some elements
That's
of this,
very
I don't understand. Are we abandoning the Hellgate Ancients loop, or is that
No.
contained elsewhere?
Well, I think if we had taken a little bit more time, we would have maybe just changed the title of that one. It's the same project. We should amend the title. We should change it from saying Lower Alta distribution line to Hellgate.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I agree.
I mean, in fact,
We just wanted to talk across, we were trying to use the new terminology in the new plan, right?
sure.
Instead of sticking with the old terminology,
Well,
so
it's
we were
Lower
kind of.
Alta, Lower Alta distribution line, formerly Hellgate loop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had two questions. The Alta storage tank, that's not the one that the Schranz estate is more or less obligated to build, right? This is
Well, it's yes and no. I mean, Hanson Allen Luce determined that we are short some amount of storage capacity that I cannot recall. The Strauss estate will have to build a water tank if they do a development. They have to build their own water system, which would include storage. If the Strauss estate develops and builds a tank, that could reduce our need for additional storage because of the way our systems would be integrated. But we just don't know if that project's gonna happen. So I think this, the strategy right now is to program it in for an out year and let that process play out and see what happens with a potential Schranz estate development or not. And then if we get a few more years down the line and it hasn't happened, then we gotta build a big old tank. But and to be clear, we have to build a tank of some volume anyways. Because the Schranz estate, I mean, I don't know, maybe the Schranz estate would build us that 500,000 gallon tank or 0.365 million gallon tank, whatever it is. That makes sense.
It's a placeholder.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Maybe they all really are. Something else Shannon and I talked about is whether we ought to be programming out inflation in these numbers. We haven't done that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I really did with that, you can see that the miscellaneous revenue which is, mostly made up of interest. I have just that $1,500 in there. But on the expense side of things, once I got beyond FY 26, very bottom line where it says water fund annual expenditures, I did do a 10% annual increase built in across operating expenses. We already went through these slides, so I'm just gonna kind of skip over them and the rates. Nothing's really changed substantially on that sort of stuff.
A lot of writing on this one.
Yeah. So this is the sewer fund projects.
Yeah, and so we've got 30 million for next year to design the kind of number one priority recommended by the engineers, which is to fix or replace the pipe segment between Gold Miners and Peruvian, which has the notorious sag. So we're proposing to include that. We did not think to then go ahead and program in engineering costs for out year projects like we did in the water fund, but that's something we probably need to do. to be responsible. There are a lot of individual recommendations here, as you can see, and some of these are really the only, sewer project that we've had on our minds for the time immemorial is that SAG. But the engineers are recommending a number of other replacements. One of them is also down by Hellgate. And maybe sort of comorbid with some bad smells that people get down there in the East Hellgate neighborhood. And then these others are up in Grizzly. Well, some of them are in Grizzly, and one of them is in between the Alp Lodge and the Rustler. So yeah, our sewer line needs some work, which is not a huge surprise. And then, of course, there are a couple of other things on here that are will pique your interest. This number to replace the rest of the sewer system is bigger than the number to replace the existing water system. And then we also have this updated cost estimate for a West Grizzly sewer extension. That's something that we've talked about in the council meetings, something that I talked about with West Grizzly area residents and property owners. This is an updated cost estimate from Hanson Allen Luce based on the design that the West Grizzly folks had done several years ago. There's one more piece of news on that which is that we may be able to spend a really nominal amount of money alongside the ski area as they roll out the cold storage building project in a way that would allow us to install a shorter line to West Grizzly, which would potentially save us 20% or so by having to do a shorter alignment if we want to do that project.
Where is this
And that's all.
cold storage building project? Isn't that adjacent to the Albion lot?
It is on the north side of the Albion lot, kind of
Right.
where Banks, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
got it.
So they're gonna have some plumbing there, and
Yeah,
it's
and
in
that,
between. It's in between the sewer line and West Grizzly or Emma Heights, and so.
yeah, gotcha.
Dallas points out that it's a really steep slope, and that makes it expensive, and potentially reduces contractor. Like some contractors are, don't work on 30% slopes, which is what that is. So, never a dull moment.
Yes.
Nevertheless, it's nice to see the estimates going out. I'm a little shocked at the 4.5 number, particularly after that comes after all those other investments as well. But it's nice to see that we're getting real numbers behind this.
Yeah.
And I think this is the kind of stuff that we've got to present to the town residents so that they understand the reality of the situation.
Yeah, great, yeah.
Yeah, if you want your toilets to flush,
Yeah.
this is what it's gonna cost.
Yep.
You want water to go into the tank,
Yeah.
Brooke, well, this is the last slide in the presentation, and now we were hoping to just go through the actual detailed budget, with you. And I was just going to, give you some highlights of some things, on each slide, if that works for everybody. I'm not gonna go through every line item, but I'll just point out some major stuff, if that works. Okay, so, I'm gonna focus on in the, what is that, pink? The FY 25-26 draft budget column. I'm gonna focus on the comparison of that to the 24-25, but I do wanna point out, that this is the first time I also have worked up what I think is gonna be, and it's a work in progress, but the amended final budget for June. I've included that in your packet here just to give you a preview of that as well, but that won't happen until June. So two big highlights on this page. One is the 500,000 for the property tax. Again, that's the increase of 100,000 there that we've been talking about. And then the other thing I was going to point out, which we've focused on a few times, but is the 1.89 million for sales tax, staying the same.
Yep.
I don't have anything else to point out on this slide unless anybody has questions. Oh, yeah, I guess, can I still click? Okay. Okay, on this page, charges for services, you will see, in that first section, I have it, italicized, it's a little hard to see, but we've programmed in, the OLS. And so this is use fees, so this is revenue coming to the town. This would include, you know, potentially lease rent from ACE and from other organizations, that use that space.
All of which is subject to,
Yeah.
you know, the final outcome of a rental or lease agreement with ACE.
Yes.
And where,
the
which line item is that, Jen?
charges for services, the top section, 1034,761.
Okay, oh, got it. OLSU's fees, got it. Okay,
Yeah.
20K.
And then down in the transfer into general fund, the new number that Chris kind of previewed earlier is 296,000 that would be using from cash on hand. I think it's important just to note that this represents about 10% of our general fund annual budget. So, you know, to John Burns' point that we were talking about not reducing that fund too much, we would still hold, you know, 90% of our budget as cash on hand. So I think that's really good. It may not be aggressive enough for Craig's liking.
Well,
Any-
over time, we're gonna spend this on capital projects. I think, we can talk about how to present it to get the town to understand it and support it, but that's for later.
Highlights on this page are really, the only thing I really want to point out is that we are, you know, Chris and I have been talking about very modest increases to the salaries for the council and mayor.
For the council?
For the council.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is the first we've discussed this, we just, I mean, hey, take it or leave it, I guess, but, we think it's, you know, the stipend to council members has not changed in over 11 years. And, we've got an election coming up and I think it's reasonable to consider a, you know, nominal increased expense to the town to, provide more compensation to, you know, balance out the demands of being a council member, because it's gonna get harder.
Well, it's 100K, no, I'm sorry, it's $100 a month now, is it not?
Yes.
And you're increasing it to,
I had that detail on a former slide. I want to say it's 150
Yeah.
for council
Okay.
members. So it's, like Chris is saying, it's nominal,
yeah.
but it's just, it's a little something.
I would call it
Same
an acknowledgement. Don't really have much to point out on this slide outside of maybe one thing, just a preview for the FY25 June year-end budget amendment is that we're proposing to take 15,000 from the professional services legal line item in this is the admin department, and move it into the planning, so that the net cost to the town won't change. We're just taking 15,000 from admin and moving it into planning and zoning for legal fees, because that's where they're spending their time. And then we've kept the budgeted amount of 45,000 the same for FY26. On this, okay, so if we look down bottom half of the screen, the civil code enforcement. We just have not had the bandwidth in the office to do the initial legwork to get an administrative program up and running, so we're gonna push that forward to FY26.
hang on. It said no metering. I thought last time you talked,
Oh,
you
yeah.
said there's gonna be a rollover on the metering project.
A different kind of metering. This is metering, this is, and this is something I did just change, in the last 48 hours, we'll say. This is metering for the road.
Yeah.
And we
traffic-
just
traffic meter.
haven't done that in a couple of years. It's typically a no net gain loss to the town of Alta, this year. We administer the program and hire the officers that do that. Mike, I didn't actually have the chance to speak with you about that, but I mean, now with the medians and stuff, it's just, we haven't used it or done it in a couple of years, and I don't know that that's gonna change unless.
I rate the odds of me managing a metering program in the upcoming winter at 0.
Okay, so I just felt like
Oh,
it seemed best to clean it out of the budget, and if we need to roll it back in the future, we can, but. So different metering.
Got it.
Police department. Okay, I mean, we've talked a lot about that. I think it's
Yeah.
status quo for the most part. We've got.
Yep.
The increase to the budget represents a 15% increase in that wage. Line item, which obviously we know that includes the 5th officer. This includes both scheduled and unscheduled OT and. So. Seems pretty reasonable. I don't have anything to point out here unless anybody has any questions for the post office. I do want to point out that this is the top section is the, sorry, my titles didn't carry over, is the building inspection section, and we are proposing kind of a pretty big increase to the cost for professional and technical inspections. Chris, you can probably elaborate on
Yeah,
that, why.
We've been working now with WC3, West Coast Code Consultants, to do plan checks and inspections for building permits and for a couple months, and that's been going well. They're super responsive and organized and extremely thorough to the chagrin of our applicants. I should not say that, but they've been great. They're more expensive. And we knew that, I knew that going in. Basically it costs them more they're gonna bill us for essentially half day to come to Alta, because that is what it takes to get here from locations in the valley. I don't know how, if we were able to pay $90, which is the hourly cost for our inspector under Forest Grant, our previous cost to get inspections done was frankly unrealistic. I don't think anybody else is getting a deal like that these days. So costs to do inspections are going up. And we wanted to reflect that in the budget. We are working with them on an approach to a building permit fee schedule update. That's, I've done one of those in a very long time. I don't know if it's gonna lead to the fees going up or not, but it's all part of the picture of what your building permit fee is supposed to be, the costs to administer the service, so. And we have taken in quite a bit more in revenue this year in building permits than was in the budget because of the big ski area projects primarily. So that's this fiscal year, and this is about, this.
Yeah.
$40,000 amount is for next fiscal year, but we're gonna kind of net some revenue potentially. Shouldn't think about it that way, but.
I'm going back a couple slides because I failed to point out, and Chris spoke to this earlier, but about halfway down on the screen, 1051, 645, the Alta Resort Shuttle.
Yes.
I did program in an increase of 8%, so from 252 to, what is that, 272?
So that's the vendor's costs going up
Yep.
and it's within the, we've got a 3-year contract that can go up 10% a year. So that's within that allowance, but we're gonna get a first of probably a couple stakeholder meetings together tomorrow to talk about this year's program and what changes we might want to consider for next. So that could lead to, program cuts, frankly. Hypothetically reduced costs.
On this side, another push forward, I guess, is the impact fee study. We're just not gonna have it's not realistic for us internally to get an RFP out and actually have somebody hired and do a study within this fiscal year. So I've pushed that out to FY26. And here you'll see a new department, top of the screen, Our Lady of the Snows. And you'll see there that I've programmed in, I think this is we had a great meeting with Sarah Gibbs from ACE yesterday, and I've been talking with Connie. I think this is the high end, but again, we want to make sure that there's something in the budget to represent potential changes to the budget with the acquisition of Our Lady of the Snows. So, we expect these numbers to change based on whatever sort of lease agreement that we work out with Altus Community Enrichment here in the near future, but figured I would get some numbers in there just for now, placeholders.
Do you have anything in the capital expense area for Our Lady of Snows that needs to be
Yes,
done?
we do.
urgently?
Yeah. The main thing is the patio. We have $100,000 next year for that project.
Right, but are we showing that? We're not showing that for,
This is general, this isn't capital, that's in the capital
Oh,
projects
right,
plan.
oh, okay.
But is it but we're not gonna do it this summer, right? So that
No,
would-
next year.
next summer. So that will be in the following year's capital budget plan.
It could be in FY26, or I have it in FY26 right now, but it could be in 27.
Okay.
And then at the bottom of the page, you'll see that we are proposing $150,000 transfer from the general fund to the capital projects plan. Oh, I think I went to, no. There we go. That's it for the general fund. Now this is the capital projects fund, and I have a few things on this page that need to be updated, as we discussed earlier. For the FY26 year, I need some. Well, I want to point out that the 950, the line item 4539-250, the use of reserved funds, is basically us. That's a tool that we need to use to balance this budget to get it to zero. So that's basically how much of the capital projects fund money we'll use, the cash on hand, to fund the other projects that we have in FY26. In the municipal building section for the capital projects expense, that number, like we said earlier, I must have only been looking at a couple categories and missed some. So that 1.1 million will increase to include the Tom Moore and the facility planning. And then I have to
it's going from,
these numbers are kind of off, I'm sorry.
yeah,
It's
75K
better
to
to just look at
1.1
it.
mil.
I need to redo this page.
Okay, all right.
It's gonna be too hard for me to explain to you the changes. You're not gonna be able to follow along. So this is. We do the capital projects fund budget alongside the general fund budget in this big Excel document. I didn't take everything from the other capital projects plan and properly import it onto this page, is basically what happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does that throw us off
So
for our
that-
upcoming
so
meetings, or is that okay?
No, I'll be able to fix it. I know, it's easy to fix. So as long as you guys felt good about what was on the capital projects plan that we talked about earlier, we're all set. So I'm gonna skip over that, for now. On the water fund, we have a 10% increase, which we've discussed, to ratepayers. I do have right now a loan, this is in this miscellaneous revenue, 51,36,300, that 505. That's our estimate on what a loan from the general fund might be, but we're hoping that as we get further along in the process, we'll only really take a loan of what we need, right? We'll try and reduce that number as much as we can.
Yeah, so we won't actually do that until we know what we need.
Yeah.
And then we'll do a budget amendment.
Right, and that might lay out perfectly with adopting the budget in August. We might be far enough along in the project to know and be able to roll that in with that meeting and with truth and taxation and all that.
Sounds good. Quiet summer.
The only thing to really point out on this page, 5140, 495, water treatment supplies. One of the things that's just changed a little bit over the years is that we used to do pH adjustments at the Bay City mine, and for various number of reasons, we're not doing that anymore. And so it's made the cost of the media, or it's made the regularity with which you have to install new media happen more regularly. We used to be able to get by with replacing it like every other year, and now we're looking at every year. Casey did run some numbers for me to do if they were to go back to doing pH adjustment, and it basically was the same, and there's a huge liability with like safety hazards and stuff with doing the pH adjustments. So this seems to be the better option for our workforce safety, I guess is how I would frame that. But I just wanted to point that out because that's adding. And then on the sewer fund budget hasn't changed much, and the only thing new to highlight on that is that we added a code 5240-320 about halfway down for engineering into the operations budget. So that's a new line item for us. That's all I
that you
got.
put those in italics.
Yeah, I will, once they get adopted, then they'll just be accepted in, but it helps me keep track of that sort of thing.
Sure.
Because they have not been entered into like our actual accounting software or anything yet. And I just don't want to spin my wheels if they're not gonna be something that gets adopted. So. That is all we had.
Well, there's one thing that's relevant to this, because it's the same group. It has to do with the RFP for the audit. And
Yes,
tell us, give us a few words on that.
I have a draft. Basically, the plan, as we last discussed it, was that Roger was gonna have an informal 3-person selection committee. So what I think the next step is that I need to get my draft RFP out to the committee, and then we kind of go from there, and then we can launch it and go through the process of selecting an auditor.
Okay.
And I did increase, based on some feedback from Steve Rowley, I did increase the amount for the annual audit in our budget. So I think, so.
Oh, it was 10 per year. What do you?
Yeah, 12,500.
Yeah, okay.
I did a 25% increase.
Yeah.
Might be a little low, honestly, from what Steve said, but I think we're We're not very complicated, so. I think the selection committee, Roger, was it you, Craig and John Byrne that you were thinking?
Um, that's fine. I don't remember what I was thinking.
That's what you had told me,
All
unless.
right.
It doesn't
remember
matter
it
to
better
me.
than I.
I'll prepare, I've prepared the document. I think it's just, we have to release it and be ready to go through the process.
Jen, why don't you ask Steve? In audit contracts I've seen other places, it's higher in the first year and then goes down for the subsequent years. Why don't you ask Steve if that's common sort of in the city stuff too, or if they just equally spread it?
Okay.
Because that should go into the RFP if it's common.
The other off the wall item is this. This week I was in the CWC meeting in which we talked about salary increase was for the staff there. And what the staff came in and elected said, instead of a 5% increase, we'd like to go to a 4-10 schedule.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting was right. And it was their initiative, which the board accepted, but it was, I think that really has some very long-term consequences, because since you're normally increasing things a percentage, if you start with a lower number, you end with a lower number too. Doesn't compound. Now, I don't know if that's even legal for a town operation, or if it's even advisable, and I'm certainly not looking for any sort of response to that, except the one that you gave, Craig. It's interesting.
Well, it's not dissimilar to the conversation we had around the marshal's office last time, where we said, the way that we structure it is a draw for, it narrows the pool of applicants, but it probably decreases the turnover. And long run, decreasing the turnover is immense. So
economically positive.
yeah,
I think there's also, the unique challenges of arriving at the office in our town
You're right.
are also somewhat mitigated by that as a proposal. I went to one of those when I ran an organization under state law in Oregon. Technically the National Guard, they're state employees. And we did some 410, and we also did a 459, where you do 4-day week,
every
5-day
other week,
9 hours kind of a thing too. And I'm not proposing or pushing for one or the other, but I think we should be very open to some of that flexibility because of the demands of the canyon, which aren't going to get easier. So I assume this is just a discussion at the moment, but I think it's something we should really talk about, because turnover is something I am particularly sensitive to, because we have an exceptional staff. We're going through an exceptional time, and we're going to be doing a lot of things that require a high level of performance, and combined with the background information in order to make those decisions and follow through. So I do not want to lose any of the 4 people in that room. And if I feel like they're leaving, I may have Mike Morey accost them, lock them in the evidence.
Yeah, Mike's leaving. He's
locking the door behind him.
If they're talking about it in all seriousness, I think that's something we should definitely. I'd like to hear more about what they all think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in some ways it's preserving the culture of our past. What I mean by that is that it used to be that the people that worked in the town of Alta were all huge outdoor enthusiasts. Some of the people that we've had recently don't fall into that category, but if you're a real outdoor enthusiast, having that kind of schedule probably works better for you. So it's not just the traffic, it might actually be an important cultural preservation element. Again, not for this meeting, but
Yep.
it's something to think about.
Yeah,
But
I don't know if you all know this, but the ASL goes to 410s in the summer.
I did not know that. And
Yeah.
but I think we should entertain it. Ultimately, the organization I led, which was much bigger and had other requirements on it, but some similarities were sometimes demands on your time or logistical impacts. In our case, that could be weather and it's skier traffic and these other things. We landed on a 459 kind of a thing. I think we should really talk about this because if it's better for our people,
It's better for us.
I will be an advocate.
Yeah.
Well, it's better for us too, but that my starting point is I feel responsible for our staff, and that becomes very important to me. That becomes the primary consideration because they're already, by assumption, they are doing. It is better for us because they are us. So I think we should talk about that more. And now I will probably interrogate some of my staff people later between now and some other meetings.
Well, I think maybe this is something to take up when we get to the important project of updating the employee manual. I guess just as a general reaction, I would say that on the administrative side, we kind of have that flexibility on an individual basis as needed. We've always had that kind of flexibility, but deciding to have the office closed every other Friday or every Friday would be a big step. I do recall, however, that many state agencies went to that and then I believe reverted back to 5 days a week. And we are not the Division of Workforce Services or the DMV, but we are a walk-in customer service organization. And
But a
Lots of things can
410
change.
doesn't eliminate that, Chris. You can stagger what people do. Tuesday through Friday, Monday through Thursday. So there's other things you can do to still provide what you think is public service. And again, I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying there's things you can do that allow you to accomplish this if you want. One of the things that we do have in our back pocket by virtue of the authority and the town manager is you can manage your workforce, buddy. Like you guys can do things without having to make it some mandatory or official thing that gives you greater flexibility. And I will always support you on that because if you hire the right people, you don't have to watch them. They do the right stuff. And you guys all do the right stuff.
yeah, I think we're in a good position that way. So thanks.
One more thing, Dan, when you back in town?
I'll be back at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Okay, and Craig?
I'm back late Sunday night.
Okay.
Is there anything else from any of the committee members because we'll update our presentation and be presenting to the council next week.
I'm gonna go look for a bondsman around Tampa, and if I find one, I'll steer it towards.
A bail bondsman
Otherwise,
or
I'm gonna peel off. I gotta go do some stuff with some top secret military people.
All
Probably
right.
a beer.
Can I get a motion? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Dan?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, see you guys later. Thanks.
Fine.
All in favor? Forgot that part.
Unanimous. Thanks, folks.